Make sure you track me down and put an end to Stain, the vigilante who killed 40 heroes. All for the sake of forging a better society.
Alright, let's pause for a bit and go back to the part where Stain says that he
Killed 40 heroes.
Now my question is, why did Stain kill 40 heroes? You could come up with all sorts of answers. Like he said, he was trying to forge a better society, eliminating fake heroes, excising the greedy and corrupt from among hero society. But is that actually true? I'm not simply talking about the verifiable results of his actions, how he inadvertently enabled the rise of the League of Villains. After all, as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. No, I'm talking about the legitimacy of his motivations, his convictions, the things he did for the supposed greater good. Because unfortunately, if we really sit down to analyze Akaguro Chizome, the man known as Hero Killer Stain, it becomes abundantly clear that his nobility is shallow, that his convictions are empty, that the character who I like the most in My Hero Academia is sadly very poorly written. Let's explore this, shall we? If we really want to understand where Stain is coming from, understand the depths of his motivations, we have to talk to a better writer than Horikoshi. That would be Hideyuki Furuhashi, the primary author of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, a spin-off series that acts as both a side story and in some ways a prequel to Kohei Horikoshi's manga. He also happens to be one of the authors who worked on one of the K-Project novelizations, specifically K-Side Blue, so, you know, he has a pretty good pedigree. But there's a reason why Furuhashi's spin-off series Vigilantes is so important to this discussion. In terms of the timeline of My Hero Academia, Vigilantes marks the very first appearance of Hero Killer Stain. Here, he's a vigilante known as Stendhal, who hunts down and executes anyone who he sees as being a villain. While it's true that Furuhashi doesn't have much to work with, given how little of Stain's backstory is given depth or veritas in the main series, he does a phenomenal job painting the picture of a man so driven by a sense of upholding societal goodwill and normalcy that his vision of right and wrong becomes almost perverse. For example, one thing that Vigilantes explores in an interesting and humanizing way is the morality and social impact of what the series calls instant villains. People who, for whatever reason, go on a rampage using their quirks. Vigilantes makes a separation between such an individual and a person with criminal intent, with such characters often showing up later after being helped through whatever personal crisis they were dealing with. Just as in real life, sometimes someone is just having a really bad day, or otherwise feels like they are at the end of their rope, and if they get some form of help, then there's no reason to permanently label them as a villain. In Stendhal's eyes, any major breach of the social contract we all live by is enough to warrant execution, whether they be members of a small mafia group, a few punks roaming the street, or someone on a rampage. They are all worthy of death for having disrupted societal order. This worldview extends to Stendhal's attempt to kill Koichi, another vigilante and one of the protagonists of the story, for the crime of helping someone who Stendhal was trying to kill. After another protagonist, Knuckle Duster, arrives and defeats Stendhal after an exchange of words, his worldview begins to fracture and transform, a process that would eventually lead him to become the villain we all know and love, Stain. This twisted transfiguration leads him to see the world as a place where there are no truths, no falsehoods, no boundaries to cross. He also says further along, "I will dye the world red. The blood that flows from me is proof enough. It is the path I leave in my wake, a path to serve as a guide for others. These bloodstains will never fade." This all gives the impression of a man who has become unmoored from morality, whose actions do not avenge the wrongs of society, but rather bring the deepest hidden aspects of society into stark and bloody display, exposed and out in the open. A world where he seeks to turn on those for whom his twisted mind believes have failed society, by not doing enough to punish evil and vanquish the wicked. In a way, it's similar to a Joker archetype, except applied onto an anti-villain, which is the best way the Joker has ever been written, and no, I will not be elaborating at this time. And that is such an exquisite way of constructing a character, especially an anti-villain with corrupted ideals, or at least it would be, if the version of Stain we see in the main series matched up to it. Because in the main series, Stain's ideals are those of upholding justice and opposing corruption. He paints himself as a dark justiciar, similar to a Batman archetype actually. The unfortunate truth is that Stain would work better as an anti-villain Joker than as a vigilante Batman, because we have to come back to the burning question I posed at the beginning. Why did Stain kill 40 heroes? I think it's time we take a look at Stain's victims. Let's analyze those who Stain saw as such a corruption of societal goodwill that he would be moved to... Wait. Hang on. Do we actually know any of the names of the heroes who were murdered by hero killer Stain? No? That's a problem. But we'll circle back around to that issue. On the other hand, we do know the name of one of the survivors. Ida Tenya's older brother, Tensei, the former Ingenium. Perhaps by analyzing Tensei's past, his ideologies and beliefs, his goals and convictions. Wait, hang on. Do we actually know anything about Tensei, besides the fact that his brother described him as being a good man and hero? No, we don't. The main series gives us no other relevant details. Luckily, Furuhashi is, as I have stated, a better writer than Horikoshi. In Vigilantes, we're actually given quite a few details about Ida Tensei. From everything we see, all that can be said about Tensei is what his brother summarized. A good and kind-hearted man, and an outstanding and selfless hero. And this is the point where I began to notice something about the way Stain is written. Because hero killer Stain believes that no one can match up to All Might's ideals, that all other heroes are fakes and corrupt. And since we know absolutely nothing about the few other named heroes who Stain attacked, for example, Native, other than the obvious cultural appropriation, and on a side note, I don't think that's why Stain wanted him dead, we'll focus on Tensei. As I've described, Tensei's only portrayal is that of a selfless hero, a paragon of justice who sought to uphold societal goodwill, defend the weak, and rescue civilians who found themselves in harm's way. In this regard, the only difference between the former Ingenium and All Might is a matter of scale. All Might, being among the strongest of heroes, could simply do more and greater than Ingenium ever could. Ingenium also confronted Stain, getting in his way, and nearly paid a dire price for this encounter, barely escaping with his life. At first, I wondered if either of these might be contributing factors to the way Stain selected his victims, especially the comparison to All Might. After all, if Stain's true motivation was eliminating all those who simply couldn't measure up to the symbol of peace, then it would mean that no hero in existence would be safe, and then the thumbnail and title of this video would be very different. And as an aside, you might be tempted to make the case that All Might is the only selfless hero who doesn't seek to capitalize on his fame through merchandise and products, but that very clearly isn't true. He has the most merch of any hero we have ever seen in the series. Bad argument. Just thought I'd point that out. Back to the video. That could partially work with the anti-villain Joker adjacent Stain we saw in Vigilantes, but only barely, and it most definitely doesn't work with the dark justiciar Stain we are shown in the main series. Stain is a man of forethought and cunning, no matter how twisted his thoughts may be. Simply killing heroes because of some vague notion of them not being strong enough just doesn't fit either version of his character. This also tracks with the fact that he considered both Midoriya and Shoto to be worthy heroes, both despite the fact that they confronted him in a manner similar to what Tensei did, and the fact that they weren't anywhere close to the level of strength of All Might at the time. But this is all semantics, really. Do you remember that point I said we were going to circle back to? About how Ida Tensei is the only named hero from among Stain's victims? Doesn't it seem odd to anyone else that such a catalyzing event for the story of My Hero Academia, the emergence of hero killer Stain, only had narrative impact because Tensei was seriously injured? Let me phrase it a different way. If Stain's presence in the story would eventually have such a major impact on the progression of the narrative, why did it have such a small impact on the lore? It's almost as if, and bear with me for a minute, it's almost as if Stain only exists to enable a few story beats to happen, and his existence means nothing otherwise. Now, how could I possibly say such a thing? Let's do a little thought experiment. Say we remove Stain from the story completely. What parts of the story stop working entirely as a result of the hole left behind? Well, Tenya loses his motivation for interning at an agency just to hunt Stain down for revenge, and Shoto and Midoriya don't attempt to rescue both him and a group of heroes. Assuming that other events could have brought them closer together, this isn't that consequential if we're being honest. It's a narrative hole that is easily filled, since that part of the narrative barely has any impact at all on the wider story. Interestingly enough, the only other part of the narrative affected by Stain's absence are the events surrounding the growth of the League of Villains. Because after that point, all Stain amounted to was being the star of a propaganda video, and one that didn't even match up with his own vague ideology. To put it bluntly, Stain is a tool. A character who had amazing potential, but was used as nothing more than a writing crutch for a lazy author. Now, you might disagree with that assessment, but if you do, I have only one question to ask you. Why did Stain kill 40 heroes? Why did he almost kill Ida Tensei? Not because Tensei wasn't a true hero, but because Horikoshi needed a way to motivate his brother Tenya. Why did he murder and maim so many other heroes? Because Horikoshi needed him to seem dangerous, needed him to give more veritas to All Might's heroic nature, and finally, Horikoshi needed an easy way to introduce a bunch of new villains. And that is why Stain's death scene is as predictable as it is, while lacking any catharsis. What happens when a lazy writer needs to redeem a poorly written character whose only purpose was being a narrative tool? The same thing that happened to Toga Himiko. The character is redeemed through death. Because how else are you going to redeem a man who killed 40 heroes for no discernible reason? I mean, there are better ways. But that, however, would require a better writer than Horikoshi could ever be. Dear viewers, imagine a version of Stain that was more like the anti-villain vigilante version of Joker from Batman the Telltale series. Imagine that Stain was so moved and inspired by All Might that he publicly credited All Might with everything he did. Every murder, every crime. Imagine that Stain was so obsessed with All Might that he acted as a twisted foil to All Might's pure heroism, to the point that Stain became a living nightmare to All Might, making him feel a sense of personal responsibility for Stain's existence. Doesn't that sound like a much more enthralling and nuanced version of Stain? Anyway, thank you for watching. It feels very good to be back in the saddle after a bit of a break. As you might know, life comes at you hard sometimes and it takes some time to reach equilibrium again. One way you could help with that process is liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and telling me what your opinions of Stain are. It really helps with the creative process knowing what people think of these videos. I thank you immensely for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next video.